This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee. It's Monday, February the 24th. And from present at the start of the meeting on the committee is I see Counselor Maliki from Ward 3, Counselor Gentile from Ward 4, Counselor Humphrey from Ward 5, Counselor Bixby from Ward 6, Counselor Grossman from Ward 7. I know that Counselor Mickley has a family commitment tonight, so I don't expect him, but I'm assuming that Maria and Counselor Lipoff, Counselor Greenberg, there's Counselor Lipoff, so and there's Counselor Greenberg. So we have 7 out of 8, which is what we expect, so we're all here. First item is 40-25, Her Honor the Mayor, requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $35,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and the Department of Fire Services for mobile radios and repeaters for the fire department vehicles, sets of gear, and eye shield protection. I see yes, Mr. Bianchi from the fire department is here. Michael, why don't you go right ahead?
Thank you, Counselor. This $35,000 grant is from the Department of Fire Services. We will be using this money for mobile radios in our trucks, replacement of those, also additional gear, and also the eye shield protection for the department, which will help in car accidents. And when we're cutting glass and metal, the eye protection is very important for us. That's all I have.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Council Lipoff, to approve. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes unanimously with 7 of us being here.
Thank you.
Eight?
Why, is Council Mickley here?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, wrong.
All right.
7.
It's always a good idea to double check what I'm saying, so I have no problem with that.
I thought you said we were all here.
All right, next item is 23-25. The Community Preservation Committee recommending authorization to appropriate and expend $1,471,000 and to authorize a general obligation borrowing of an equal amount to rehab the basement of the Jackson Homestead and Museum. Molly, I'm going to turn it over to you to start, but I know you have other folks here that you're probably going to introduce, so go right ahead.
Yep. Hi, everyone. If I haven't met you already, my name is Molly. I am the Community Preservation Program Manager here. With me right on my screen is Buzz Dunker, our Vice Chair.
Hi, Lenny.
Hey, Buzz, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
And Buzz is Vice Chair and taking time out of his Parks meeting to come visit with us. And Dan Brody is also here, and Dan has done a lot of work with us on this project in terms of the bonding and figuring that out. All right, I'll get started with the presentation. All right, so today we're here to talk about the Jackson Homestead Basement Renovation Project, which recently went through Public Facilities Committee. The scope of the renovation includes waterproofing the basement, climate control, and HVAC system upgrades, and improving finishes. As you can see from the picture to the left, water is infiltrating the basement through the fieldstone foundation walls, causing instability to the structure. Doesn't look great. As part of phase 1 of this project in 2022, Habib and Associates Architects completed a report with existing conditions and conceptual design ideas. And CPA funded that to 75,000 of historic resource funds. I think people know pretty much that the Jackson Homestead is eligible for historic resource funding. It really is the face of historic resources in Newton. But this is some historic background information if you're not familiar. It was the site was settled in 1646, and the federal style farmhouse that is the Newton's History Museum was constructed in 1809 by for Major Timothy Jackson. It's a local landmark. It's individually listed on the National Register, and it's eligible for historic resource funding. The building was donated to the city of Newton 75 years ago to be operated as a museum, and we understand they have a big anniversary plans coming up. In addition to preserving the important structure, completing this project will allow for the expansion of the museum's exhibition space into the basement, better serving Newton residents and visitors. So this is what we're recommending for funding. We've decided, the Community Preservation Committee has decided to bond this project. We'll talk more about what went into that decision, but the $204,000 represents A&E expenses, architecture and engineering that would need to be spent prior to the next fiscal year. And so those funds would need to be made available immediately. And the bonded amount represents the bid amount. Bidding is scheduled to happen in August, which would be the next fiscal year. The bid amount and contingencies, and we've decided to bond to that amount. The committee at their 2 meetings ago now in January discussed the threshold for bonding. Ideally, the annual debt payment would be no more than 20%, I think 20 to 50% of the annual target. So CPA funding includes 4 targets: historic resource spending, open space, recreation, and community housing. And so the idea would be that whatever is our target amount to spend for what we bring in that year, no more than 20, I think we actually came closer to 50 in the end, percent of that amount would be spent on debt service payments year to year. So that's where our goals are. And we also discussed the ownership of bonded projects. The committee determined that all projects that are bonded should be publicly owned, and many of our largest historic resource projects, which you will have seen in the last year, First Baptist Church being one of them. The Grace Church is another big one that we've done recently. They're privately owned, and so therefore they're not great candidates for bonding, as opposed to the Jackson Homestead, which is a resource where we can easily allocate funds over a period of time. I talked already about the A&E expenses being needed before June 30th. And the natural division of expenses would be this 141,400,071 to be bonded, and then the architectural and engineering expenses to be paid out of our unrestricted spending. These were the options that the committee looked at. The first 2 columns represent what were probable low and high interest rates at the time of the bond sale. And I know I ran this past Maureen as well when we initially discussed it, to look at a range of what the lower and higher end of a payment we could end up making for 5, 10, and 15 years. We also looked at what the second 2 columns represent, the lifetime cost of those ranges as well. And the committee decided to recommend 10 years. We felt that the range of payments for 10 years made the most sense for our current finances. That is all I have right now, but I am happy to answer questions, or if Buzz or Dan, you want to say anything as well.
No, I think that's very good.
Marla, let me just jump in for a minute. There is a second part to the request that I should have read into the record. And that is, the CPC is also requesting an appropriation of $204,000 in Community Preservation Act funding from the unrestricted prior year funds to the control of the Planning and Development Department for the immediate soft cost expenses of rehabbing the basement. So there's a second part to it. All right, question.
And
Go ahead, Molly.
I was just going to say Lisa Dady from Historic Newton and Josh Morse are also here and can answer technical questions about the project as well.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the committee. I've heard this in public facilities and I'm familiar with it from discussions that we've had in the past. So I got all the information that I need last week. So questions from members of the committee. Council Humphrey.
Thank you. I guess since I wasn't at that committee presentation, I would love to just hear a quick synopsis from either or both Lisa and Josh. I don't need the full details because obviously this has been kind of in the works for a while and we had the previous study and everything, but just kind of, what we're hoping to accomplish, what timeline, things like that, just, kind of quickly. Thanks.
Sure, happy to jump in. And Lisa, if you want to speak to the archives portion, happy to kick that over to you. But from a facility standpoint, basically, it's a fairly straightforward project. The existing basement is a fieldstone foundation, as Molly mentioned. This actually dates back a couple decades ago. One of the early projects at the Jackson Homestead. This was something that the Public Buildings Department had wanted to tackle, but it didn't fit within the budget. And since then, the condition of the basement foundation walls has deteriorated, not surprisingly for a fieldstone foundation in a building of this age. So what this project is going to do is it's going to waterproof the foundation, stop the water infiltration, address any dew point issues. It is going to replace the portable dehumidification units that you'll see kind of scattered around the ceiling and in closets when you go there, with a central system that is sized appropriately for the space. And it will help improve the overall climate control for both temperature and humidity for the archive space and have a subsequent effect of improving the conditions throughout the building. And then lastly, it's because we have to do all that work, we've got some finishes that we're going to have to restore and repair. So the nice thing is it will also have a nice effect to the general look and feel of the space when it's all said and done. And then that will ultimately pave the way for Lisa and her team to do the archives upgrades down there, which will be what the community then benefits from.
I would add to this too, that one of the things we discovered in the feasibility study is that part of the reason that water and moisture is getting into that level of the building is water is being trapped behind porches. The gutters are old and sort of separating. There's a hole in one. So there's actually exterior work that is involved here, new gutters and new front porch and side porch, which is going to have a wonderful sort of aesthetic effect. Those are also in disrepair. So we're having kind of the bonus of being good stewards of the exterior of the building. I want to appreciate Josh for finding some funds to do some painting on the outside as well, hopefully this summer. So there's a real overhaul that's happening. And then with the improved space in the basement, we have in the past tried to have collections down there. It's difficult to do that when you can't control the humidity. It's not appropriate or for us to do that. But with this improvement, we have the flexibility to store collections, but have exhibitions and have the public down there. And it's not pleasant for the public to be there at this point, as well as the artifacts. So we're really looking forward to the finished product.
And with the
Thank
thank
you.
yous, I'll just say thank you, Mayor Fuller, and the City Council, because those funds I didn't just mysteriously find. Those were approved by the City Council as part of free cash authorization, I believe, in December. So thank you to all of you as well.
Yes, you're very welcome. No, thank you. And then Ms. Lemieux, just briefly, Molly had mentioned that you felt comfortable with this recommendation from a financial standpoint. I don't know if you had any further comment on that or not.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. The only comment I would make is we just recently sold our bonds this year, probably mid-February, and we received a true interest cost of 3.78. So at least right now, we're on the low end of the projections. Of course, none of us know where we'll be a year from now, but certainly, their estimates for potential costs are well in line with where we would want them to be at this point in time.
Thank you.
Council Malachi.
Thank you. So I listened to the recording of public facilities, so I benefited from that. Regarding the sort of keeping water from getting in, besides the gutter work and porch work, I mean, is there anything going on with like French drains or keeping water away from the building, or has that already been done?
So part of the design process is going to be, as Lisa mentioned, anytime you're trying to waterproof fieldstone foundation, the first step is to make sure that you're keeping water away from the foundation. And Lisa was speaking to that with respect to gutters, downspouts, any, fine grading issues outside. The second step is to address the water that is getting in, through the foundation. And it's not just water, it can also just be humidity and moisture. So that's a process that you address both outside and inside the foundation. So that'll be something that Habib and Associates, our design team, will be taking a close look at the best way to address those issues, both from a finished product standpoint, as well as kind of an impact to the building, and then subsequently a cost perspective as well.
And I think, did I hear at public facilities that the building's all electric already, or going to be all electric?
It's going to be all electric with this project. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't really have very many long power failures, but in the event of a power failure, it's unlikely we would have anything long enough that would mess up the dehumidification and so forth. Is that
honestly, power failures in a building like this, our bigger concern that we would tackle right away would be if we lost power in the winter, we'd be looking to drain any plumbing systems to make sure we don't get any frozen pipes. Typically for a building like this, we would need to do that in probably 48 hours. Although we would do it much sooner, we'd have about 48 hours before that became an issue.
Okay. And so I'm fine with the project. I'm just curious. It sounds like it's going to be a great space for programming, and you do so much with kids, especially on the educational stuff. And I know it's not handicapped accessible now, but is that kind of like the next thing that you would want to get to? Because I feel really bad for, like, wouldn't want to be the one kid in the class that doesn't get to go down and see the program in the basement.
Well, just to be clear, and Lisa, feel free to jump in, but to be clear, there is an accessible route to the basement.
Oh, okay.
It is, and it's existed for quite some time now. It is not, it's not an ideal situation, but it is an accessible route whereby you can go around the building and come in through the rear entry into the basement.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. So a kid doesn't have to miss something that the rest of the class is doing. Great. Okay. I feel better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still be nice to make it easier, though. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? I have one that came to mind based on what Council Malachi was just asking about. Anybody that's been in that basement and has seen that limestone foundation, can see what a difficult job it's going to be to waterproof it. So if we do get to that point, how much would a generator cost in the event that, there was a power failure for a system or a building of that size?
Councilor Gentile, are you referring to, say, a summertime power failure where humidity became an issue?
Just in general, any time of the year where, if the electricity goes off, then, we're going to have possible problems with either flooding or humidity or whatever. I'm just thinking this is a unique situation with this building. If we're going to put all this money into it, should we at least be thinking about a backup generator, which we don't typically do, but maybe it warrants considering it here.
It's certainly something that we can take a look at. What I would say is that for the two different scenarios, in the event that there was a prolonged power outage in the summer months when humidity is high, public buildings has portable generators. The fire department does as well. I think Parks and Rec has them. DPW, I think, has some. So we have resources available, especially for a smaller facility like this, to be able to provide the power necessary to maintain appropriate humidity levels. And then in the winter, as I mentioned, our primary focus would be ensuring that we don't have any burst pipes. So we would probably be draining the building to protect it in that respect. But even with that, we probably could maintain reasonable temperatures above freezing on a portable emergency generator there as well. But it's certainly something we can take a look at in the project to see if a small backup generator makes sense for those kind of critical HVAC systems.
So how much, I mean, I have no idea. How much would a generator that would do the job cost for a building of that size?
So as a backup generator and not a life safety emergency generator, which would be something that somebody might have at their, vacation home up in Maine, for our purposes, it probably would be in the $50,000 to $75,000 range. Not for the generator, just the generator, but for the infrastructure, the emergency electrical, transfer switch, that kind of stuff.
Okay, because the other thing is things don't always, we don't lose power at, the best time of the day. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the night and before you know it, I just think that this building, it's the historic building. We're trying to preserve things. Maybe if there's some savings when you get into the project and you wanted to consider using them for this purpose, I think it would make sense. So I just wanted to make that point. All right, anybody got anything else? Council Greenberg, did you want to move this item?
Yes, please. Move to approve.
Okay. So Council Greenberg moves the item, both items, the money. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor of the item, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you, Josh.
Bye, Buzz.
All right, so the next item is, I'm going to jump around a little bit. 38-25, we'll come back to 39-25. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $109,930 from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for waste reduction. And I think Juanita is here to present the item. Juanita, it's all yours. Miss
Hi there.
Faber.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair Gentile. So this grant is a competitive grant that Newton applied for in the Mass DEP grant cycle. So it was last June, and the award was announced in December. This project is a statewide education project to study and better understand with tangible data the benefits of policies such as extended producer responsibility. For those of you that don't know what that policy is, I would say it's not really a mainstream term, but it is a policy mechanism where the producer of an item, let's say a mattress, the producer of a mattress is responsible, legally obligated to set up and pay for and manage a system to collect and take back their product and then responsibly manage it. So mattresses can be recycled. So a law like this exists in Connecticut, and we all know that DEP banned mattresses, but we all were left footing the bill, all the municipalities. So this project was proposed to understand to quantify the benefits to municipalities if these laws were to be passed in Massachusetts. So this is looking at the benefits of an EPR law for mattresses, for paint, for electronics, and for packaging and printed paper, otherwise known as our single stream recycling. These are all laws that have been passed in one or more states in the country. And the grant would pay for a consulting team, which is the Product Stewardship Institute, to perform this work. And in addition to the money from the state, the city would be putting in $10,000 of existing grant funds, our recycling dividend program funds, for this project.
Okay, all set? Questions? Any committee members have questions on this? Council Malachy and then Council Greenberg.
Thanks. So, how many would we be studying communities statewide or Eastern Massachusetts, or what's the scope?
The scope would be the entire state.
Okay.
Of course, it would have to be municipalities that engage on the project. The intent is for there to be a calculator that is made so that any municipality could plug in how much they're currently spending on these materials and understand how much they would save. So whether it's staff time or the actual recycling costs, or you could even put in like the amount of the tons of recycling that you generate and understand what that savings potential is.
And so you said it's 10,000 of city money?
Yes.
And
well, it's grant dollars. Yes.
A different grant. Okay. From the recycling dividends. And what's the benefit to the city of us doing it? And what's the benefit to the state of having us do it instead of the state just hiring the consultant themselves?
So I would say that Mass DEP saw this, again, it was a competitive grant. So they saw this as a net benefit to the state. I would say Newton has a lot to gain if these programs were to be adopted at some point in time. So Newton has a history of being a leader on this area. In other states, what has driven the success of passing these laws is municipalities really asking for them and kind of making that demand, because we have the most to gain from making this change, the systemic change. So I don't think that the state is in a position to move in this direction, I think politically speaking. And so they saw this as a relevant project that would benefit everyone. And that's why it was awarded.
So basically, they're thinking we're more motivated to do it than a state agency is motivated to do it.
I think so. I mean, we have a lot more to gain than they do.
And I noticed you had a savings number for Newton for mattress recycling, but does that represent that money that the city is paying now, or does that represent that the money that households are paying in that, what is it, $40 fee to dispose of a mattress?
So you are right. I mean, the city is paying the bill, but residents do pay for those individual mattress collections right now. And that fee varies. If it's curbside pickup, it's $60 per piece, or if it's drop off, it's $35 per piece. Okay.
So the fees that people pay now cover the full cost of the city disposing of the mattress.
Correct.
Okay. And I have questions related to the sort of the responsibilities of the grantee in the scope of work. And Councilor Leary is going to be joining us in a couple of minutes, I think. She is more informed on this than I am, because she has sort of done some dumpster diving. But it sounds like, especially at schools and even at City Hall, we might be sort of on the surface, recycling, putting things into recycling containers in offices or lunchrooms or whatever, but they're not, there may be overpackaged in plastic bags or corrupted enough that we are not, the Waste Management, when they collect our so-called recyclables, they can't actually recycle them. So is that going to violate condition 4, recycling in practice? The grantee has established paper, bottle, and can recycling in all municipal buildings, offices, and meeting spaces, including schools. The grantee shall continue such paper, bottle, and can recycling during the term of the grant. And then further down, it says, I guess the state has the right to do inspections.
Yeah, so that is actually a condition of existing grants that we already have. It is an eligibility requirement to even apply for these grants, that you need to essentially attest that those recycling services are in place. So while I would say, I'd be the first to say that these recycling systems at our municipal facilities need improvement. We do meet the minimum standard for the state right now, simply by having recycling service. There are municipalities that don't actually even have recycling service for their schools or for municipal buildings. And that's really what they're trying to resolve at this point in time.
Okay, so basically the fact that we're trying is enough.
Yes.
The fact that we could be recycling, even if we're not achieving it perfectly, is enough.
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, that's it for me, I think.
Okay, Council Greenberg.
Well, thank you, Chair. So Ms. Traber, could you just explain the program a little bit more? I'm just confused. Are they going to look at if a resident has a mattress they want to get rid of or paint, the manufacturer of that mattress or the paint would pay the city to have it disposed of or recycled? Is that how it would work?
So the way that it would work, so these systems themselves, I would say they vary by material, how the actual mechanism gets applied. So for example, with paint recycling, this is a law that is established in all of our neighboring states except New Hampshire. And the way that that functions is that, so right now we collect paint down at Rumford Ave. We collect oil-based paint on household hazardous waste days. And right now we collect latex paint solely for reuse. But at the end of the season, anything that wasn't used, we call and have it picked up and we pay for that to be recycled. So if a law were to be passed for paint EPR, we would still collect things exactly the way we do right now for paint. And then when we need a pickup, we would call a separate nonprofit organization that gets established to manage paint, and they come and pick it up and we do not get billed for it. So in that case, a cost that we are currently incurring, we no longer have. And that's because that system is set up to be financially sustainable. It has funding from a different mechanism, which is a point of sale fee on each gallon of paint that is purchased, something like 75 cents to $1 per gallon. A very similar system would be set up for mattresses for a law like that. But for something much wider in scope, like packaging and printed paper, the way that those laws have typically been passed in other states, there's 5 states right now that have passed those laws. Those act more as a reimbursement, and we would need to modify our system to meet some set of standards and then be eligible for reimbursement. But that could be reimbursement all the way up to everything that we pay for processing of our recyclable materials that we collect from residents and the transportation of those materials, which for Newton is millions of dollars. So what this project is doing is understanding, again, tangibly quantifying how much savings each municipality could have. I would say I do have a good handle on specifically what Newton could save. However, there is more to it than that, where, again, we could count staff time, we could add in there could be like a calculus for each ton of recycling that could be a little bit different than an existing state program. So this project would have this portion of, I would say, kind of administrative back end work to create this calculator, and then also do education sessions. I think it's 4 education sessions around the state to inform other municipalities about the benefits of these programs.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it better for me. Thanks for all your hard work on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to
There's
approve?
Actually-
hands up.
Who's
I have
up?
my hand up.
Oh, okay, Allison, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I was in the car driving. I had to pick my daughter up, but I was listening to the conversation. So I just wanted to say that I'm very pleased that we're getting these grants. The EPR in particular, which is way overdue in our state, and I think we know that it will save us money. So I guess if we dive into those details to see actually the specifics will be a great thing. So I'm really happy that we're having this discussion and getting these grants. And then with Councillor Malaki's point about the recycling, I think we definitely could do a better job and probably have that conversation with the Sustainable Materials Management Commission and the mayor. I think we really need to get that message from the top that we should really, if we're going to put out a recycling cart, we should really have a process in place that it actually gets recycled. Because in City Hall and other areas, they're in plastic bags, and that gets thrown in the trash or it won't get recycled. And we know that. So we need to have it. And it seems like a simple fix, but I'd really like to have a conversation with the mayor and to see if we can really move that along so that we're actually recycling much more efficiently. So I don't really have any questions. I just am very thankful that we're having this discussion and getting those grants so that we can actually do a better job. And we have made a lot of progress, so I'm really happy about that. So thank you very much.
Okay, can I get a motion from someone, please?
I'll move it.
Motion to approve.
Okay, Council Maliki has moved approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Juanita, you have one other item, so let me move that up. It's 41-25. From honor the mayor requesting approval to enter into a 5-year contract for curbside collection and recycling processing commencing on July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2030. Go right ahead, please.
Okay, I have a brief presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is an update on the status of the FY26 to FY30 curbside collection contract. So the procurement process that we pursued, I would say that this is a change from status quo. So these services, trash, recycling, and compost collection services are 30B exempt. So the practice that the city had in place since the time that the city had moved from in-house trash collection service to contracting out for that service, to my knowledge, we had worked with BFI initially as a contractor, and then that company was bought by Waste Management, and we have worked with Waste Management since that point in time. We have renegotiated contracts because we wanted to ensure, I would say, stability in our service, and Waste Management, I would say, traditionally has done a very good job of service. We sought a proposal to renegotiate our contract 2 years in advance, starting in spring of 2023. And the reason we wanted to do that was to basically see what pricing they would offer us at that point in time. And it allowed us time when we saw the pricing and determined that basically we thought we could do better, that we would pursue a request for proposals process. At the same time that that decision was made, it came to light that Brookline was interested in contracting out their trash collection service for the first time. They have still been doing in-house service, and that their contract for recycling collection ended at the same time as ours. And so we had several conversations and decided to move forward with a collaborative RFP process with Brookline. That was issued in February of 2024. The proposals were received at the end of April of 2024, and analysis and discussion with Brookline lasted over summer and into the fall. Ultimately, a mutually beneficial joint municipal contract was not attractive. Newton did analyze proposals, of course, for the most advantageous contract for us. The most attractive proposal was from Waste Management, which we support. However, the RFP process was ultimately successful on controlling costs and providing attractive services. And I'll go into more detail on that in just a moment. So about the joint effort with Brookline. So we saw a lot of potential for economy of scale improvement for both communities, which should lead to lower costs. There was potential to haul Newton's trash to the Brookline transfer station, which would be a lot shorter distance and thus cutting transportation costs than right now. The practice is 6 trucks every single day drive from Newton all the way to Millbury. And then those trucks are housed in Norton, Mass. So they go from Norton in the morning to Newton to Millbury back to Norton. So we saw if the trucks were going from Norton to Newton to Brookline back to Norton, it's a much shorter distance. We also saw the operational efficiency potential by sharing some staff, such as a route manager that would oversee both communities, and some administrative support services could have overlapping staff on the contractor side. However, during our analysis and even, upon receiving the initial proposals, the potential benefits did not come to fruition, and more misalignments in kind of incentives among haulers came to light, that I would say were not something obvious at the outset. So going into what is in the contract. So in the RFP, we requested pricing proposals for curbside trash collection, curbside recycling collection, trash disposal. Even though we currently have a contract for Wheelabrator Millbury, we wanted to understand the pricing in the marketplace, recycling processing, management of our cart fleet, bulky item pickup, white goods collection, yard waste collection. Again, we wanted to understand the marketplace. We do that in-house currently. Organics collection service, dumpster service for municipal buildings and select residential properties, and then mattress recycling, which is not currently part of our curbside collection contract. So these 10 services were what was included in the RFP. Ultimately, what will be included in the contract is curbside trash and recycling, collection, and then hauling to the end site, single stream recycling processing, bulky waste and white goods collection, cart fleet management, including procurement of carts and parts for carts. And the services include repairs, deliveries, swaps, and removals, dumpster collection for, again, those municipal buildings, including schools and some residential properties. And then also roll-off service at the Resource Recovery Center for cardboard, rigid plastics, municipal trash, and construction and demolition debris that is from city operations. So changes from our current contract. So actually, I'll go back to this slide. So these are all of the existing services that are in our current contract. So there's not kind of a big change in that direction. There are some changes in the contract, though. There will be two big public facing changes. One is that we included a annual residential education guide that the city will design and provide the final design to the hauler by a designated date. And then the hauler is responsible for printing that and sending it out citywide. And that takes a big administrative burden off of the city to be able to make this happen, which has been a barrier in the past. We are also removing 4 holiday delays for MLK Day, President's Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Veterans Day. The reason for this, particularly for the 2 winter holidays, MLK Day and President's Day, is that these operational delays, they don't serve an operational function. And so they actually cause quite a bit of logistical challenges. And, you know, when it's a delay week, there's just more things that can go wrong than on a regular week. Particularly those winter holidays. A couple of years ago, we had an instance where the week of MLK Day, there was a big snowstorm during the day, and Waste Management, it was not safe to operate. So Waste Management needed to cancel those services, and residents on the Thursday collection day did not receive service that week. And they had to wait another week for service. And the reason for that is DOT hours restrictions for drivers. Basically because we were already in a delay week, there was no more time that we could borrow from to just move. We couldn't have a double delay, essentially. More on the behind the scenes side of things, the changes from our current contract, our recycling processing, the way that it's charged right now is based on what is compiled and leaves the facility that we send it to. So it goes to the Waste Management Avon Materials Recovery Facility, or MRF, MRF. Right now we are charged on what leaves their facility, which is not something that we have control over. So we are going to be getting charged based on the composition of what we are sending them through an audit process. So that's a kind of big change that, as demonstrated by other communities who have fought for this, basically we will see savings because right now the way that the formula works is to the hauler's advantage, and this new formula will be to our advantage. And then further, we will have the capability of recording collections tied with GPS to the address that is being collected, which would give us the capability of much less chasing of missed pickups. We know for a fact right now that occasionally residents will forget to set out their carts and then simply report it as a missed pickup, and then we are sending a truck back to go and get that. So this capability allows us to hold residents accountable. I'm not saying that we would implement that right away. It's just the technology would exist with this new agreement. So overall, we saw success from this RFP process, regardless of not joining forces with Brookline. When we went out for the proposal pricing in April of 2023, from this current year that we're in to FY26, we would have seen an 18.4% increase. And after going through the RFP process, we will now see less than a 5% increase. So all of the numbers are here. It's definitely been to our advantage to have gone to a competitive bidding process. So a question I get frequently is about organics collection. I would say this is kind of the next frontier of sustainable materials management, is how to get food waste out of the trash. As I said before, we included this as one of the services we wanted to receive proposals on. We received 2 proposals, but cost is the biggest barrier to adopt citywide service. The proposals we received were between were 1.5 million for one of them and 3.8 million for the other. Since we are going to be moving forward with waste management, they are interested in exploring a model of co-collection, and we're going to continue discussions of feasibility on how to make that work. And if it seems feasible, we have the potential to apply for grant funding to get that off the ground. What co-collection is, and it's been put in place in some other parts of the country, essentially there's a specific bag, like a plastic bag. I would call it, it would be like a thicker plastic bag, but say it's a designated color, say dark green. These bags are either sold or made available to residents for free in some fashion. So, say they're available at retailers for $1 a piece or something like that, similar to our overflow bags right now. Residents would get these bags and then separate out their food scraps into this designated bag, and then they would put it into their trash cart with their regular bags of trash. So, you'd have your regular white kitchen bag of trash and this green, dark green, very specific bag for the organics. And then there's a mechanical process on the other side that pulls out that specific colored bag and then processes it for the food waste. This is, of course, seen as being very efficient from a transportation perspective because you don't need to add a third truck to the route. Instead, you are collecting with the same number of trucks that you're collecting for trash, and you don't need to increase your capacity or anything. It's literally people just taking, it would be residents taking food waste that is currently in their trash and moving it into a separate bag. So it's not creating new space. You don't need a separate cart. There's a lot less overhead for that system overall. Lessons learned from this process. Pursuing a competitive price is worth the effort. There was a ton of work put into this project. We must start early for an RFP process. We were about 15 months when the RFP was released. We were 15 months from our contract expiring, but we found that trucks and equipment ordering can take 18 to 24 months. So really you want to be in that time frame. It's useful to map out and understand contractor infrastructure. So all the major players, they all have these fleet yards where their trucks are based. And then there's the end sites of where the recycling goes and where the trash goes. And all of those permanent infrastructure pieces are really going to dictate a lot having to do with costs and transportation in this realm. And then trying to collaborate with other municipalities will make the process longer, especially if it's a town and a city trying to work together because we have very different processes, but it's likely still worth considering. And that is what I have.
All right, before I recognize Ms. Lemieux, I just want to remind the committee, though it's helpful to have the information, some of us got the presentation last week. The main reason well, the only reason really that it's in finance is because we're being asked to approve a 5-year contract, and the council's approval is required for that. But as I said, obviously a lot of good information from Ms. Traber. Ms. Lemieux, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, before you begin your comments, on behalf of the administration, I just wanted to make sure that we publicly thank Ms. Traber for her knowledge, leadership, and vision when it comes to our solid waste and sustainability and recycling efforts throughout the city. Anyone who has worked with Juanita knows that has great confidence in her management of this critical service that we provide. And so again, just on behalf of the administration, I wanted to make sure that we publicly said thank you to her.
Thank you. Councilor Grossman.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Lemieux, I was going to start with similar comments. Ms. Trabert, every time I hear from you, I am deeply impressed by your knowledge, your passion on the subject, and on the steps that you've taken to move Newton forward on all of the different lines of sustainable waste and resource management that you've laid out. It's incredibly impressive, and I'm so happy that we have you doing this work on our behalf. I had a couple questions for you, and I definitely support and trust that this contract is in our best interest, so that's not a question. The holiday delays, can you help me understand the genesis of it? From the resident perspective, I understand the value add that it would bring on major entertaining holidays and not having large amounts of waste sitting around in a resident's home for a period of time. But most of the time, and maybe this is because my trash collection day happens to be closer to the end of the week rather than the beginning of the week, I find it not helpful, and actually the opposite. It's sort of a hindrance. It's also been interesting because we're Black Earth compost customers, and that's one of my next questions about kind of where we're going with Black Earth and some of these other ideas. That it doesn't line up often, that what Black Earth does and what waste management does are not in sync. So I guess I'm wondering, where did the holiday delays come from? And is it still beneficial to have any or more than perhaps, the two major holidays that come to mind, Christmas and Thanksgiving?
So I would say the current holiday schedule that we have, which has 11 holiday delays, I would say it originates with the original city holiday schedule for city staff. And so that was kind of ingrained into the culture. And so when the city went from providing in-house collection to contracted out collection, those holiday delays that we have right now were requested by the city. And now it has changed where the contractor wants to have as few delays as possible. However, one of the benefits that they provide to their employees is having, they call it the major 6 holidays off. And then we also need to have a delay for Patriots Day because the marathon runs through Newton. It makes no sense to not delay for that day. So that leads to us having 7 holiday delays. And so that would be basically like the minimum for what we need to provide. And I would say the contractor would be hard pressed if we wanted to cut it down to 2. I think that would just become more of a battle. So by reducing it by 4, I anticipate that some residents will appreciate it, but I think in the short term, it's going to be a big change that we're going to have to. There is no way that we can over communicate this, because if someone makes the assumption that there is a delay and there's not, they don't set out their trash, and there's no way that we're going to operationally going to be able to go back and service half the city. So we're going to have to, again, over communicate it and kind of put our foot down and say, like, sorry, we told you in 17 different ways that this was happening. So I think the first year or 2 will feel a little rough. But I think, again, we're going to put out as much publication on this, sending out, like, we have at Mind to send out a postcard, a citywide mailing specific to this issue. We have an app that sends reminders of when your trash day is and accounts for those holidays. So we're going to do everything we can to prevent there from being resident confusion. But I can say that right now, even though the schedule has been the exact same for over 40 or 50 years, it is still the #1 call that customer service receives every single holiday that people get confused about right now.
Thank you. And I certainly understand that the contractor needs to and should provide their workers with appropriate holidays. It sounded from the presentation like they wanted to reduce the holiday delays, but am I understanding that, are they doing this at our request, or they wanted to reduce these holidays, but just to this extent?
So I would say for this RFP, we proposed to move to this schedule of 7 holiday delays. And for waste management in particular, they found that to be the most agreeable schedule as well. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial fit. The reason that I had included that recommendation was after, I would say, doing, a review of what could be improved. That's certainly something, again, operationally, it doesn't serve an operational function. It's just kind of a tradition. And for the workers, they don't actually get an additional day off because they just have to work on Saturday. So they end up with a 3-day weekend. If it's a Monday holiday, they end up with a 3-day weekend on the first weekend, but a 1-day weekend on the next one. So yeah, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. So on the food disposal, I have a number of questions about this, and I've learned so much over the last number of years as we've started composting, and you and advocates on the council, like Councilor Leary, have advocated composting. What is the, I don't know the right terminology to use here, but what are the benefits to sort of like the greater good of putting food waste down a garbage disposal versus in a compost bin? And how does that compare to what would occur if we were to go with one of these different models that you talked about, where we would have different color bags in the same cans?
Yeah, so regarding the drain disposal or like a garbage disposal, that is something that is not desirable by MWRA. They do not want that to be in our wastewater because it ultimately ends up being more material for them to manage on the other side. That has been looked at before by myself and other municipalities. So that is not looked at as being the most advantageous way to try and shift resident behavior. Sorry, what was the other part of your question?
Well, I suppose then let me know what the benefits are of doing something like a Black Earth composting system. And obviously that's been, optional, though it seems to be ticking up in interest each year, versus a system like you talked about where Waste Management or whoever our future provider would have this secondary bag system.
So I would say there's pros and cons to each system, but Black Earth right now, they have a very functioning working model. So it's very similar to our trash and recycling service in that a separate cart is set out and a separate truck comes and picks it up and then takes it to an end site. So it's a working, functioning business model. I would say the problem for the city is that is costly to add that third truck and a third cart for every resident. And it's just not something that has been deemed a financial priority at this point in time, because it also doesn't offset by, if we remove that amount of, so the number is 30% is basically the amount of food waste that is in, kind of the overall residential trash stream. So if we were to remove, say, all of that 30%, we don't offset the cost of sending that third truck out and managing a third cart at every home. So we still end up with a net cost. So with the other model, with this co-collection model, I would describe it as it works in other places. They've put in a ton of effort to build that infrastructure, because what we're missing right now is the actual spot to sort those bags. So our trash every day goes to Wheelabrator Millbury, and that's a waste energy facility. They do not want to install equipment to sort anything. So we would need to, we as the city, or working with Waste Management and they working with their other customers, need to find a designated site, and then there would be, some initial upfront cost of the equipment, to be negotiated. It would certainly be owned by Waste Management. So, maybe we're just paying per bag that's sorted, something along those lines, but it's not a functioning business model right now in Massachusetts. The closest one that is functioning is in Middletown, Connecticut. And we did have a presentation at the Sustainable Materials Management Commission by someone from Middletown to understand what was going on with their system. And then this idea originates, I believe, from Minnesota. And so there's several counties there that have this functioning system, but it's not widely adopted. And right now there's no functioning business model for it.
And on the food waste line, and Mr. Chair, let me know if you want me to stop. I have a couple more questions, but I just find this so fascinating. And there's obviously cost implications to the city as well. What is our current policy on food waste and composting in our municipal buildings as well as in Newton Public Schools?
I would describe that there is not a policy about diverting food waste. For public buildings other than schools, we don't have food waste diversion. Like there's not food waste diversion at City Hall. The food pantry does have food waste diversion for, I'm assuming perishable items that they're not able to salvage. For schools, there is not a district-wide policy at this time. There has been numerous efforts by several stakeholder groups, including DPW and the school district, to get food waste diversion happening in cafeterias if there is kind of a willingness and interest from the school. So they have to come to DPW and say, hey, we really want to get food waste out of our cafeteria. And then we need to know that there is buy-in from the custodian in that building, the principal in that building, and that there's some staff person who's willing to be a point of contact. So there's kind of this formula that we've developed, but it's really on I would say, ad hoc case-by-case basis. Right now we have 4 elementary schools that are diverting food waste, and there's a middle school, Brown Middle School, that is, I would say, in the planning process to get food waste diversion in the cafeteria in April. And that's the first middle school that's been looking into that. And both high schools have, I would say, student groups that are very interested in getting it off the ground, but making it logistically work has not yet been successful.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I know both of my kids in running and serving on the 5th grade student council at Ward School ran on this idea, but their effectiveness in implementing this type of program, it has not yet come to fruition. But to me, this is very low-hanging fruit. And I just think that we should lead with our behavior. And this is just such a straightforward way to do it. So I will stop there, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Ms. Trabert, thank you.
On the question of, I see another hand, Council Maliki, and then I'd like to get to a vote on this.
Okay, if you want to go first before me.
Who, me? No,
Yeah.
go right
Okay.
ahead.
So I had a question for Juanita. Who bears the cost of chasing down the quote unquote missed deliveries? Does Waste Management sort of bill us on a per incident basis, or is that just sort of they do it?
I would say that it's essentially included in our existing services. We, in our contract, have a provision for, we call it a chase truck. So it is like a pickup truck that person, they're the person doing cart repairs, swaps, deliveries, removals, and then they also go and chase these missed pickups.
Okay. So they just work it in.
Yes.
Okay. And the change thing where you would have the technology to document. I guess I don't understand how that would work because, I mean, I know I've had, you know, them miss my pickup when it's out there and they're driving down the street and I guess they don't stop because they didn't pick it up. But how would that look different from somebody who really had not put their card out and they didn't stop?
So the way that the camera technology functions is that think of it like a GoPro on the side of the truck.
Oh, okay. So it's actually recording everything they see. Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah.
Exciting viewing. Okay. All right. Thanks. And I noticed the fact that, and I'd heard your presentation before, the fact that our recycling processing fee will be based on the composition of our recycling kind of gets to the point I was making in the last item, where if we do better on not having contamination and stuff that can't be recycled, we'll realize better savings than if we don't perform well. So that's good. Thank you.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the request for a 5-year contract?
I'll move it.
Okay, I think I saw Council Maliki first. So before we vote, I just want to make one comment for the benefit of people that may not have the chart in front of them. You know, we from time to time, though it's been a while, have these discussions about a number of no bid contracts that we do, particularly in the planning department. And as Juanita pointed out, when we negotiated just directly with Waste Management, the proposal ranged from an 18% increase in the first year down to a 5% increase. And when we went out to competitive bidding, the increases range from just under 5% down to 3%. I think that's a message worth considering. All those in favor of the item, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Juanita.
Thank you so much.
Back to 3925, Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $50,000 earmarked for the FY25 Massachusetts state budget for sidewalk improvements around Underwood Elementary School.
Chair Gentile, I will be presenting on this item.
Go right ahead, Commissioner.
Public Works is improving sidewalks and ADA ramps in a 1/4-mile radius around the Underwood School this summer. We plan to use the $50,000 in earmark funding for improvements to the sidewalks and ramps at the Vernon and Eldridge Street intersection. These additional funds will allow us to make further improvements in the area of the school. Really don't have much else on that. Happy to take questions.
Council Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. First of all, I want to thank retired State Rep Kay Khan for accepting my request for state funds to be used for this intersection. For some background, about a year ago, the after-school program called Service Star, the children there reached out to me and alerted me to the poor condition of the intersection. And they were concerned about the elderly folks who lived at Evans Park because the ramps weren't accessible. So I spoke to Rep Khan, and she was able to get $50,000 from the state. And as the commissioner stated, this will be rolled into that amount, into the city funds to get that improved. So thank you all.
Okay, Council Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question for the commissioner. There has been a little bit of an issue with water pooling on the corners there. It's been pretty persistent, and I think Councilor Greenberg, you might be aware of that too. I think it's the corner where the church is, the side the church is on. And I was hoping that maybe with the improvements, they could address that as well, because I've had gotten complaints of slippery water and slippery conditions in the winter.
I will have it investigated and we'll
Great.
find a solution. Maybe
Thank you very
drainage
much.
issue.
Okay.
So this is getting done. Thank you.
Council Greenberg, did you want to move the item?
Yes, please, I'd like to move approval.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, the motion's been made to approve the item. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 7-0. Last item, 43-25. Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend $200,000 from the city's allocation of transportation network rideshare funds from the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund to supplement the funding for the Manhattan Street Pedestrian Improvements Project.
The Public Works would like to use these requested 200,000 in funding for the design of the Manhattan Street corridor pedestrian improvements. Design costs and construction administration costs are approximately $296,000 for this project, and construction costs are anticipated to be between $1.1 and $1.3 million. The city previously set aside $192,000 of funding for intersection improvements at Manhattan and Wells Ave. We'll use a portion of those funds for the rest of the design costs. The city council recently approved a $500,000 Complete Streets grant for this project, and we will be docketing a request for $487,522 in transportation mitigation funding from the Opus project once the design is complete. If we need additional funding, of course, we'll be back to council. Happy to take any questions on this.
Okay, this isn't new news. We've been talking about this project for a while and how it's being funded. Are there any questions? Council Lipoff, would you care to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion passes 7-0. All right, that concludes our work for this evening. Once again, I want to thank all of you here for not only your attendance, but for being prompt on time so we could get going. I appreciate it. And I would say that we're adjourned for the evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.